And I realized I was muted. So all of you online, I was just saying that we're going to be doing a chant in just a moment, the 5 remembrances. And it's there in the document in your chat. You can click on that and open that up if you want. Otherwise, feel free just to listen. And as I've been saying these last few months since we've been learning this, just a encouragement to memorize these 5 remembrances, kind of our daily or weekly, how often, depending on how often you do it, but just a dose of grounding into the simple shared reality that we have as humans, that we are vulnerable in these ways. And kind of makes sense to want to live in alignment with the truth of our existence instead of in some fantasy world or with idealistic notions. Because the interesting question, really the creative question is, well, whatever freedom, whatever ease, whatever natural kindness and love, it's going to arise from being connected with the way it is, not from being disconnected. I mean, you would never imagine somebody writing a self-help book about, the joys and effectiveness of being disconnected. Let me tell you about the internet. All the ways that we can be disconnected from the world. So that's the way to receive this chant, just as a way of grounding in our lives, feeling at home in our lives, learning to have some roots into the way it is. And it's a practice of non-fear and non-denial. And that last remembrance that we'll chant talks about kama or karma. Karma is the Sanskrit version of the word kama, which means actions done with intention, or any kind of thinking, speaking, acting that leaves an impression or a reverberation. Then that's karma. So anytime we do something that leaves, so then in the next moment, the continuation, we're the continuation of that action, that thought, those words being spoken. It's like it's left an impression. So right now, each of us, who we are in a very naturalistic sense, we're the one who did all that stuff. That's what's reverberating right now. We're the continuation of all those thoughts. We're not those thoughts. We're not those actions. We're the continuation. Whatever's left over, having thought that, said that, done that, that's what's living on right now. So when I show up in this moment, I'm really perceiving and experiencing this moment through the lens of all of those impressions that have been laid down. And that's what karma means, because it has a lot of superficial, not so helpful understandings, as it's been in the West now for a while. In any case, let's do this chant, then we'll sit together for about 30 minutes. The Buddha's 5 subjects for frequent recollection. I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma. of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma, whatever for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. Thus we should frequently recollect. Well, let's take the time to settle in, listen to the body, feeling at home, making any last adjustments. And checking, realizing that we can have a friendly attitude as we receive the experience that we're feeling what's here to feel. We're not in a rush. No need to try to get somewhere or fix something. And we're just exploring this initial sense. Is it okay to relax? Is it okay to open? Is it okay to simply feel what's here to feel in my immediate experience? To soften some. And we don't expect there to be a perfect bodily experience. So it just needs to be good enough to fully accept the sensations that we're feeling now in the body. There might be some physical discomfort, even stronger pain, but we can check, but maybe it's okay just to be feeling what it feels like now to be sitting and to be relatively still in our sitting posture, but a stillness that comes from trusting, not so much from forcing stillness. Trusting that it's okay to just feel what we're feeling. All the doors and windows in our heart are wide open, in the sense of practicing non-fear, not being afraid of being exposed to what it feels like, including what the mood or quality of our mind feels like, quality of the heart. And we start aligning as best we can with the simple truth, this is how it is now. In a sense, we're re-inhabiting sensitivity or embracing this truth of our sensitivity. It's a kind of unavoidable exposure. But it can be helpful to choose to attune to something relatively simple and neutral, like choosing to be interested in the breathing process, just as an ordinary phenomenon, letting everything else be there in the background. But just to be aware of that simple activity of breathing in, and then that simple activity of breathing out. And doesn't mean we're controlling the breath. We can just trust the body to breathe however it breathes. But to cultivate a simple interest in the sensations of breathing in, and then with the sensations of breathing out, So in a way, we're tracking the ordinary physicality of breathing in, breathing out, learning or relearning how to be intimate, how to be sensitive without being afraid, without being controlling. So we're learning to let the breathing be a natural process so we can deeply trust it. Breathing in happens on its own, and then breathing out will happen on its own. And sometimes the breath might feel controlled or tight or too short or too long, but we just let the natural process of breathing be the way that it's going to be. And we're exploring if it's possible to be both intimate with the breathing process, but also not attached, not controlling. And this is a real training. It's not necessarily something that will come easily, to be both intimate and not attached, not controlling. And we know we're getting the hang of it when the breath, the breathing process begins to feel more and more like a natural process. Nobody doing it, just something that's happening on its own due to causes and conditions. It has a very free, almost wild-like quality. But you can't force it. It's all about being interested and patient and trusting relaxation. Being intimate and letting the breathing be. And the great thing is we're giving ourselves permission not to have to attend to any other problems or any other details of our lives. For this relatively short period, we're just going to be interested in this natural process of breathing in and out and developing this skill, being intimate, but not attached, not controlling, not having to be tight. And when it feels appropriate, You can go from the more specific attention to the breathing process as just a natural, impersonal movement of breathing in and breathing out. You can continue to be aware of the breath, but begin to open to the whole body. Just this great ocean of physical sensations coming, going, changing. Breathing in, sensitive to the whole body. Breathing out, sensitive to the whole body. But the practice is really the same as you're breathing in, sensitive to the whole body. Sense it as a natural process, the body. Just a natural arising and passing of physical sensations. Some are pleasant, some are unpleasant, some intense, some subtle. So being right in the middle of this river of physical sensations, but not grasping, not attached, just letting the body be. So do that through each inhalation and then through each exhalation and on like that. Intimacy without any need for grasping. Again, just breathing in, sensitive to the whole body. Breathing out, sensitive to the whole body. And you might notice a natural sense of embodied well-being. And you can also sense that as a natural process, whatever good feeling there is in the body, sense of wholeness, sense of calm or well-being as you breathe in and breathe out. Just sense that calm as a natural process. Something that's showing up because of causes and conditions, pleasant, healing, wholesome, and just let it be this natural and impersonal happening. Oh yeah, sometimes it's like this, and there's a lot of calm, a lot of that well-being. Can this be okay that it's like this? Yeah. Breathing in, sensitive to any of that calm, any of that well-being. Breathing out, sensitive to that well-being, and just letting it all be. You don't need to be attached, it doesn't help. It's really important to learn how to keep wholesome qualities in mind, even if it's not the most predominant experience. So we've been practicing breathing in, keeping this sense of bodily well-being in mind, or calm, as we breathe in and breathe out. And also not getting attached to it, just letting it be what happens sometimes. And it might naturally mature into a buoyancy, a lightness of the heart, what we could call joy, joyful interest, kind of a bright, light quality of the mind and heart. Like an inner smile that just shines out in all directions. Breathing in, sensitive to the joy, but no need to get tight or attached about it. Just sensing whatever joy there is as you breathe in and as you breathe out, and just practice keeping joy in mind, this lightness of the heart. Even if it's faint, train your heart to be interested in joy as you breathe in, each time as you breathe out. And the joy, the brightness of joy might soften and become a more resonant ease of the heart, ease and contentedness of the heart. So breathing in, just sensitive to any of that ease, any of that contentment. Breathing out, sensitive to this ease of the heart. And just practice keeping this more resonant ease in mind as you breathe in, breathe out. Just let it also be a natural arising, whether it's faint or strong. Keeping ease in mind, but no need for attachment, no need to make it happen. Let it unfold or grow naturally, just through keeping it in mind. This ease is really the relative absence of fear, a deeper trust in the moment, and not needing things to be different. And ease naturally matures into a kind of sweet dispassion, on non-dependence on our mental activity, because of the ease and the contentment. There's less and less dependence, attachment to thoughts and any other mental activity. It's just like background sound, like the sound of birds. And we just let thoughts be thoughts. We don't have to be for them or against them. And this non-attachment to mental activity tends to quiet the mind down. Just through not being attached or identified, the mind becomes quiet. So just noticing as you're breathing in and breathing out, notice that sense of dispassion, equanimity around our mental activity, whatever it might be. It's just thoughts being known. And noticing the quieting of the mind. And just appreciating this natural process of refinement from gross to more and more subtle. It's not personal, but it's still beautiful as the mind becomes more quiet. There's more and more a sense of the space of the present moment, the space of awareness, and its stillness, its silence, it's being empty of so much. And that's really what makes it beautiful and worthy of appreciation. Breathing in, just sensing the space of the present moment, open and empty of neurotic activity to a large degree. Breathing in, breathing out, just keeping this in mind without any need for identification, no need for a story about it. Just letting things be the way they are. Peaceful and empty and silent and still and peaceful. So just as best we can, breathing in and breathing out, aware of peace. But no need to attach, no need to take it personally. So in a simple way, noticing as you breathe in and breathe out, just noticing how empty the moment can be. So we're learning to notice what's not here. The absence of neurotic activity like fearing or wanting. In fact, the peace you might be experiencing is the peace of what's not present. The absence of craving, for example, needing things to be different. And when the mind starts wanting things to be different, then the peace goes away. So as you learn to keep peace in mind, you can notice the supporting causes for that peace is the emptiness, what's not here, self-centered activity, not present currently. And we're learning to abide in this emptiness, this relative emptiness, the quiet. Breathing in, peace is being known. Breathing out, peace is being known. Take a little time and stretch or adjust your body as you need to. Nice to have you all here in the building and on Zoom. Nice to see both Jessica and Lucy here online to help. And with Lucy will be available for the online small groups for anybody who wants to stay. And here in the room we have Jenny and Ruth who will help us with the small groups if you want to stay at 11:45. It's a nice way to meet community members, but also it can be really useful, if not here at the center or online with a small group, but just to find your own friend who is actually interested in the practice to check in about what you're learning. Because the whole point with these teachings, as you kind of get with a guided meditation, you get some information and then you have to put that information into practice, right? It's not enough just to memorize the... Excuse me, 1 second here. It's not enough to memorize the teachings. The whole point of the teachings, because some religious traditions, including Buddhism, they want to put the teachings in a special box and, as if the teachings, the recorded teachings is going to protect us. No, you got to take them in, you got to make them real for you so that they lead to this kind of independent wisdom, not dependent on teachings, because you've used the teachings to get intimate, to see what's here and now in our own experience. And then that insight, that deepening of understanding isn't dependent on the teachings anymore, because now it's direct or immediate. That doesn't mean the teachings weren't important, right? Because somehow we have to get out of the box of our whatever's been conditioned in through culture. And this is where we are now, having been talking about the 3 characteristics since January, and the most subtle teaching, and I always feel like I need to give a little warning that it's okay to, for sure, don't try to figure this out, the teachings on not self or impersonal nature. It can, for some, lead to like obsessing, as if thinking about it is going to make it make sense. It's a skillful means. It's not meant to be some absolute truth. When the Buddha talks about the impersonal nature, the absence of a fixed self, because it's so contradictory of our sense of our subjective experience. Because so clearly I'm here, and then you say, but the Buddha's not saying you're not here. The Buddha's saying it would be helpful to take a fresh look. This appearance that I'm here, because that's what we have. We have this experience, the appearance that I'm here, right? It appears to me that I'm here. Clear? That's true for you, I'm assuming? And the teachings, the Buddhist teachings on anatta or sunatta usually gets translated as emptiness, and anatta as not self or impersonal nature, or everything's a natural process, is to take a fresh look at this. Siri's on board, I think. That's good. So I put in the chat, in the document that's in the chat for those of you online, and there is a Google Doc for all of you here in person. If you go to the calendar online, there's a Google Doc there, and there's probably 20 articles that are related to these teachings on the 3 characteristics that we've been going through since January. And I put a recent article today from Ajahn Buddhadasa. He's quite a well-known monk who died maybe 20, 30 years ago in Thailand, a Thai monk, and very famous teacher in Thailand at the time, including having taught a number of Westerners who was who went out there in the 80s and 70s to practice with him. Swan Mok, even some Kamgam people have practiced at Swan Mok in Thailand, southern Thailand. Arlita, our chair of the board of directors, did a retreat when you were a younger person, way back when. Yeah, so it's kind of became a place for Westerners who were seeking some introduction to Buddhism and meditation. They would go to Swan Mok, there, that monastery that Buddhadasa started. And he has a wonderful book if you want to get into the greater depth of these teachings. It's called The Heartwood of the Bodhi Tree. The Buddha's teachings on voidness. And voidness is just another way to translate that word, sunatta, that gets translated usually as emptiness. And it means, it isn't like a thing, if only I could get myself to emptiness. So whatever those teachings on emptiness and not self, you know what they point to is this moment that we're already having, all of us, each of us right now. We're having a moment, this moment is empty. It's just that our mind doesn't know that it's empty. Our mind thinks that there's something here that's not here. And so the practice is to realize that the something that we think appears to be here isn't actually here. So we have an insight into the emptiness. So we're having an insight to what we already know, this. But we're learning something about this that we haven't seen or opened to before. We're realizing that this experience of me is empty of something. And we have always, because of our conditioning, presupposed there to be something here and now. Like that this experience that I'm having refers back to this permanent sense of me, right? Don't we have that kind of sense? And it's so pervasive, that habit that we got conditioned to have, that we don't even notice we're doing it. Every single sense contact, sense experience, it always is framed in terms of, this is happening to me. This belongs to me. This is about me. You know, even when we don't like what's going on, I'm the one who doesn't like that. I'm the one who wants to get away from that person. There's always this personal framing, always, or almost always, until we start to practice, and we realize that that habit of selfing, let's call it, that's also empty of self, right? So that's the key. It's not so much like even, we can kind of neurotically think, if I just stopped using personal pronouns, I guess I'd be enlightened. And you see that sometimes, like even when I give meditation instructions, this is being known. You don't say, I'm knowing this. So, okay, I see. It's just all about getting rid of personal pronouns. No, you can use personal pronouns, but whatever the thought is, you're having an intense discussion with someone you love, like a partner or whatever, friend, sibling. I really need you to get who I am. You don't see me, something like that. And that's okay. I mean, you might need to have that kind of conversation with one of your loved ones. It's like Buddhists have those kind of conversations with their loved ones. But hopefully with a lot of practice, we begin to see right there in that conversation where we're using, personal pronouns, we're seeing it as a natural process. Yes, sometimes people have these kind of conversations with each other, and it feels like this, and it's like this, and it's empty of anything but this, right? So the emotions we're feeling, and the sight we're seeing, and the sounds we're hearing of each other's voices, all that's being known, but it's empty of anything else. And some of you might even intuitively sense that right now, that this moment is what it is, but it's only what it is. It isn't more. It isn't something happening to me. And any of that thought that this is happening to me, this strange conversation or talk that Mark's giving is happening to me, it's just something being known. And you know you're kind of getting the sense of how to use these teachings when you begin to intuitively feel how much lighter, how much more space, just psychological space and freedom there is when we operate this way. This is a pragmatic, functional way to operate in the world. It isn't meant to be something weird. It's meant, all the teachings, the Buddha says this up front, the whole point of the teachings is suffering and the end of suffering. That's what I'm about. I'm not trying to tell people what the metaphysical truth is of, the absolute reality of things. I'm not trying to kind of define things philosophically. I'm simply giving pragmatic teachings for people to address the deepest uneasiness in their hearts, actual uneasiness in our hearts. And it comes from this misperceiving, this misunderstanding that it's like a virus that we keep reinfecting each generation with. I think somebody, life, not just human life, but life generally on this planet, which is the life we know, it depends on desire, right? I mean, that's how things, that's the word we use. Like even an amoeba, when it goes in this direction instead of that direction, really simple creatures, we could call that a desire. It's desiring to go this way and it's not going that way, and it's probably senses something that if it goes this way, it might get something it wants, right? And that's true with us. And somewhere along the line, I mean, this is just a story, but just to understand, if this appearance of a permanent me to whom this is all happening is just a habit, and a very heavy habit that we've sort of picked up and that keep reinfecting each other with, why? Why did this happen? Well, one story, just to kind of give us a story of why this happened is, even, again, it's just even evolution is a kind of metaphor, but in that evolutionary process, when survival is equated with a sense of a me who wants to survive, it's like the survival desire on steroids. Once it feels like a permanent me is on the line, well, then I'm going to take much more seriously, any danger or any threat to me reproducing myself through my offspring or all the other things that are part of the evolutionary process, right? So it might just be that, because, we often equate survival as what life is about, but I don't know about you, but I'm interested in release. I'm not interested in survival. I mean, it doesn't take much spiritual maturity to realize that survival doesn't really do it for us, because there's birth and then there's death. And there's just so much uncertainty and vulnerability that's not in our hands with life. It doesn't mean that I'm seeking out extermination or something like that. It just means that to have a life and to think it's all about survival is a bit of a setup. Disappointment when death comes or when loss comes, right? Because it's like, I put all my things in this basket that is a setup to begin with. You can't keep it. We can't keep life. We can't keep safety. So when we become a little bit more reflective about just the limitations of existence, birth and death, then we might be interested in things like ease and love. And as one tradition in Buddhism calls it, what's left when we wake up is unstoppable compassionate action. What else would this living, breathing, moving, alive thing do? If I'm not neurotically trying to survive, to have more, and it's so obvious. One of the maybe the only positive thing about celebrity culture, our obsession with celebrity, is to realize that people who seemingly have it all, beauty, wealth, popularity, or whatever, are miserable. It's helpful to see that. It's like it can remind us that, maybe it would be nice to have that body or that whatever, but they don't seem necessarily happier than me, and that old decrepit person who lives down the block is always so cheerful. It's like, what's that about? I mean, hopefully we have that. I mean, even our four-legged friends, when they're old and decrepit, seem to be so much more at ease than people who have, these amazing cars and amazing cell phones and smart homes where your lights will go on when you tell them to and go off, and turn the heat up and turn the heat down, and make my bed more firm or more soft, or coffee turns on at the right time, just the way we like it, and got our steamer for our non-dairy milk, but it doesn't make us happier. It's just, in a way, all these dependencies that the self has, the sense of a me, I need this, I need that. And it goes the other way too, like, okay, I'm going to become a minimalist, but if the self thinks minimalism is going to make me self-happy, it's also the same, it's the same trap, where we presume there's a somebody back here who, when conditions are the way that I think they should be, then I'm going to really relax and I'll have it, it's like I'll really be there in satisfaction. And, satisfaction that will be lasting, because nobody cares about satisfaction that's ephemeral. So this is from that book, The Heartwood of the Bodhi Tree. Heartwood is a simile the Buddha uses, He's talking about ignorance. It's one of the more famous discourses that got recorded, not digitally, orally for about 500-600 years, and then eventually they wrote it down on palm leaves, and then over time, in other sources. And then we have these teachings even now that got recorded. So anyway, there was this talk the Buddha gave on the heartwood simile, and he said it's like a person seeking real relief, or seeking heartwood, like good lumber, the hard wood, and goes off into the forest and just brings back the twigs, like, and the equivalent for us would be, seeking real peace, real relief from our suffering, but all we do is we get fame, we get renown. So my dog likes me, my partner hangs out with me, it's something, but in spiritual terms, it's just twigs, right? Because whatever, my cat might like me, but then when I won't let it out, when it wants to go outside, it doesn't like me anymore. And it will actually kind of bother me, and what the hell? Let me out. So, and then, the simile just goes on. So somebody wants, they realize, having some fame, being liked, it's something, but it's not actually satisfying. It isn't dependable. So I'll go looking for something more. And it's just like, so you go looking for more, eventually, you want calm, or you want real understanding. But it isn't until you get the heartwood. And the heartwood really is this insight that nothing whatsoever should be clung to, needs to be clung to as I, me, or mine. That as humans, as a person, I can be completely functional, do what needs to be done without that. And he's talking about that teaching in this section. He writes, the saying of the Buddha that deals with the practice regarding sunyata, or emptiness, is the saying at the heart, that is at the heart of Buddhism. It requires our careful attention. Nothing whatsoever should be clung to as I or mine. The Buddha himself declared that this was the summation of all the Buddha's teachings. He said that to have heard this phrase is to have heard everything you need to hear. To have put it into practice is to have practiced everything you need to practice. And to have reaped its fruits is to have reaped every fruit that needs to be reaped. Right? So nothing whatsoever needs to be clung to, should be clung to as I or mine. And he goes on to explain that the I, let's see here. So we need not be afraid that there's too much to understand. When the Buddha compared the things that he had realized, which were as many as all the leaves in the forest, with those that he taught to his followers to practice, which were a single handful. The single handful he referred to was just this simple principle of not grasping at or clinging to anything as being self or belonging to self. So being self is the I, and belonging to the self is the mine. It belongs to me. Right? And this is a reflection. It's not so much we can force this insight, but we can illuminate the opposite. So we get the teaching. Now maybe this afternoon there will be some reverberations, and you'll just be naturally interested in when there is that sense of a self constructed or present in my mind, like, oh yeah, that was hurtful for me. This pain is mine. I'm hurt. This pain that I'm feeling is mine. And you'll see that, and then hopefully it will like, oh, that's interesting. Like, there's another way of framing this, because the teaching, remember, is a skillful means. So there is this sense of pain, someone insulted us or whatever happened, and it hurts. So we're not trying to pretend that that ain't true, but we're just reframing it. Okay, so what is it without that sense of a me? I feel pain, it's my pain. Okay, well then it's just this ache being known. It's the intimacy without the self-centered grasping. It's not denial, it's not repression. It's actually in the direction of exposure or vulnerability. Not, sometimes people have the wrong idea of this, the practices make us distant, give us some great distance from being a human being and all the messiness and pain and confusion that comes, just the territory of being in relationship with so much as a human, as any being probably. But it's really how to be in relationship. It's so interesting in your personal, especially the significant relationships in your lives with parents and siblings and lovers and colleagues and stuff. And just to, so much personal and neurotic tendencies get triggered in our relationships with each other. And we can think that practice has this therapeutic side, which I want to be able to relate more and more in a wholesome way, which is really good. I mean, I'm totally for that for myself. I do want to be more skillful in my relationships. But in terms of our deeper practice and Buddhist practice, learning how to be skillful in our relationships is a support for this insight, and the insight will support being more and more skillful in our relationships. But we can sense the impersonal nature of our neurotic behavior, and we can sense the impersonal nature of our very skillful behavior, and both would be really good practice. So when you're being neurotic and unskillful, then your Dharma practice is to see how that unskillfulness is empty of self. It's just what it is, unskillful, in the sense that you will be leading or causing, setting in motion harm for yourself and others when you're that's what it means to be unskillful. You're setting in motion harm for yourself and others. but that's also empty. But it doesn't mean the karmic implications aren't there. But seeing it as empty, sensing it as empty, as nature, like I'm being a jerk here, given how I'm conditioned, it can't be other than what it is. It actually helps us to take responsibility for the damage, the reverberations of being unskillful. If I'm taking it personally, then I need to rationalize why I'm being a jerk, or I have to blame, I'm a jerk because this person treated me this way, so I guess they deserve it, or I'm going to beat myself up for being a jerk. None of that actually helps me make amends, helps me learn a better way of handling situations like that. So the self-centeredness is never part of becoming a more skillful person. That self-centeredness is always a cause for more stress. It's like when there's self-centeredness, there's that burdensomeness of our heart. Without that self-centeredness, this is for us to realize for ourselves. And this could be the topic for the small groups this morning, if you're going to stay, or for those who aren't going to stay for the small groups, just your own personal reflections within your own heart, or find somebody in your life to have this conversation with. Where have you experienced moments of awakening? I know it sounds a little grandiose, but where have you experienced moments where your heart, as Ajahn Chah defines it, heart free of grasping, heart free of selfing, self-centeredness. But not self-centeredness as some contrivance like, okay, I'm going to be, not self-centered now. Because that can be just as much a self-centered strategy, like I really want to look like I'm not self-centered. That's me, by the way, being not self-centered. Right? In case you missed it, it's like me saying, oh, okay, today's Sunday, it's time to give a talk. I'm going to give a talk as if I'm not there. I'm just going to be nature up there in front of the room. It'll be great. And God, I hope I don't start taking it personally when I'm giving that talk. And it's like, so the way to practice is, it's more like hands off, where we're just observing what's happening, and when there is the neurotic selfing going on, we see that as being empty. And when there is the beautiful skillfulness going on, we see that skillfulness is not self, it's nature. It's just how it is. It's just that experience of being skillful, appropriate, navigating the moment with a lot of wisdom. But we don't have to impute that somebody's doing it, and somebody should feel pride. And if there is pride, that's also just what that is. Oh yeah, sometimes that emotion of pride arises and it feels like this. And that's really the practice. And mostly we use the teaching to illuminate selfing. Because if we use it to create a me that I want to become, then that's more selfing, isn't it? Only a self wants to become empty of a self. Right? That is only a thought that would arise from wrong view, a self-centered view. God, I can't wait until I'm free of self. From our self or egoic point of view, which is what is the frame that is normally operating for us, what we should aspire to do from an egoic point of view is want to see things as they are. So we accept the teaching from the Buddha as a counterweight to our programming to take things personally. Right? So we're going to keep taking things personally until we get a teaching like this that challenges our programming. We don't even see our programming until we get a teaching on not self. And then we realize, oh, that's true. Everything does look like it's about me. It refers to me. Now I can look at it because I have this teaching on emptiness, the emptiness of self. So in that way, the teaching is meant to be functional, not something that a self clings to or a self aspires to, but we use it to illuminate the present moment. Oh, and then it helps ease our way, like when we start having a more naturalistic sense of the present moment, how it's just stuff happening, being known, impersonal. And then we have this very faith-inspiring thought, like, oh, so many humans have had this insight, and I'm so glad it's been mapped out by people before me. I'm not this isn't personal to me. This is what people have been waking up to. And in this article, in the book, Ajahn Buddhadasa just goes on to talk about selfing is the one and only psychological, spiritual disease that we have, right? And in different spiritual traditions, they talk about it, being separate from God or different, and you can choose your map that works best for you. But Buddhism, talks about things in naturalistic terms, and it doesn't impute anything that isn't immediately here and now. We're really aligning. We're using these teachings to align with what's here and now, and not to imagine things are more than what's here and now. There's just what's here and now. And then we trust the kind of freedom that begins to arise as we practice. Just more and more space.
Mark, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Leah.
So when we're thinking about our nervous system and trauma, and how on a cellular level we're creating like neurological pathways, and that is always vibrating, right? And even passed down generationally. Can you speak to how what you're talking about, like the self and no self, apply to just our nervous system reaction?
Yeah, thank you, Leah. And I'll repeat it for those of you online, although hopefully you heard some of that. But yeah, this person was asking about the trauma. And I mean, this is the conditioning process. And for people who've had more extreme experiences, especially painful experiences, then a groove gets cut, habit gets formed. Now, in Western world, we think about materialism sort of being the lead, but in the East, we think about the mind taking the lead and the body, the brain, being the reverberation of the mind. But in any case, the point Leah's making is really important to understand, which is the grooves that exist, the tendencies, the latent tendencies, deserve our respect because they're very entrenched. And so part of our patterns is a totally understandable but inefficient way to protect the sense of a self, the appearance of a self. And this sense of a me doing my best to survive psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, physically, right? It's teetering. It's just like holding itself together. And that desperation makes that system more and more dependent on the ineffective, inefficient systems that help hold it all together. So when somebody has a lot of trauma, the person gets dependent on whatever keeps them somewhat safe from the trauma, even though if the pattern of creating some safety itself becomes so oppressive, right? So heavy, to have to disconnect from the present moment where the reverberations of the pain are, because where else would they be? So we disconnect from the body, for example, from that lived experience of body, because it's a dangerous place, because it's there in the energetic body where we feel the reverberations of unresolved pain. So, and it's kind of like this is a good example, actually. So even those of us, all of us to some degree, have some trauma. Some people have a lot more. And in some ways, I think this is a Buddhist idea, even if somehow we were able to heal a lot of the trauma from this life, that there's not really boundaries or separation from our collective trauma, whether you think of that as ancestral trauma or just the pain, the reverberations of pain and oppression and injustice and suffering that we're all part of. We're all the continuation of. So we don't want to think about the spiritual path as getting to the end of this healing. The spiritual path in the deeper sense is how to be free when there's this much brokenness. How to be connected and engaged and unafraid when it's like this. That's really the practice. And then we really start to understand how this not self-teaching, because it's the only way. It's like when we think about those archetypes of compassion, like we have some Kuan Yin statues in the building. It's a archetype that developed in the centuries after the time of the Buddha, just to represent this fearless, responsive compassion, completely fearless, all in, not holding back, not afraid. And that's what we're uncovering. But it really comes from emptiness. It's like one phrase coming out of the tradition, the winds of circumstance, all causes and conditions blow through emptiness. Whom can they harm? So when we're not locating all that tenderness, all that brokenness, all that pain, all that rage, all that deep longing and loneliness, when we're not attributing that to a self, ourself or another self, then it's just that brokenness. It's just that, some of you have had this with grieving. It's a good example because and maybe I'll end here, because grieving is a pretty common experience for human beings, right? Even the young ones in the room or online, right? There's loss of a friend, loss of a relationship, loss of a pet, loss of a grandparent, parent, a lover, whatever. And we get moments in the grieving process where there's grieving, there's that powerful movement of sadness, of loss, the real pain of loss, but there isn't anybody locating it anywhere. And then in those moments, and it may only be a second or two, it's very interesting if you would ask yourself or ask somebody experiencing that, it's like, is this grieving you're feeling? Is it painful? Or is it pleasant in a weird way? They would say both. Have you had that experience where when grieving is moving, but there's no resistance to the pain of loss? It's just moving. It kind of feels good. And it might even feel like your heart's cracking open. It can feel viscerally be felt in really intense ways. But it feels good that it's moving. We have a phrase sometimes we use, it hurts so good. And it's like that, this sort of wisdom and compassion is a little bit like that. And of course there's so much more to say to that comment, Leah. But we have to leave it here. So feel free to stay. I'm going to give a couple announcements, so stay just another minute if you would, but stay also for the small groups. I'll be leading a half-day retreat on Saturday, May 6th, 1 to 5. And Stacy McClendon and I take turns teaching the once monthly loving kindness practice. So that's the first Friday of the month. It's my month in May, so I'll do that on Friday, May 5th, 7 to 8:30, learning the loving kindness practice. It's drop-in. Always every week, practice check-ins. Stacy's is on Tuesday at 12 noon. Stacy McClendon. Shelley does one in person on Wednesday mornings with Robin Major, our office manager. That's 8:30 to 9:30 on Wednesdays in person, and then Fridays at 9. At 9 on Fridays? Yeah. online. And then Ramesh does every other week on Saturday at 10:30. And Win Fricky and I do it on Sunday at 4:30. So you can always join in on Sundays too for that. And then there's a BIPOC retreat on Saturday the 13th of May, led by Jan Racho and Stacy McClendon, 9:30 to 4. Please register for that online. And Robin has a number of programs now you can register for if you want to get out to the retreat center about 83 miles out of Minneapolis in western Wisconsin and do some retreat practice out there. So check the website for that. So nice to be with everyone. Please stay if you'd like to join a small group for 15 minutes. Otherwise, I'll say goodbye. Hope to see you down the road. Thanks again for coming. And Lucy's here. I'll make you